Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Welcome to our webinar on bridging your employee mental health gap with surveys. We will give it just a couple of minutes to wait for everyone to join, because I know it takes a minute or two for folk to just get their Zoom set up and transfer across from places. So we will just give everyone a minute or two to join. Hello, everyone that's joined us so far. Good afternoon. It's lovely to have you here. We'll just give it another second. But in the meantime, I'm Lucy. Hi, I'm the COO at Strive, and welcome to our webinar today. How are you all? Whilst we're waiting for everyone else to join, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the webinar chat. It's just at the bottom of the screen for you. It's a great opportunity to network, so feel free to say hi, leave your name, your location, job role, and even maybe how you're doing or what you want to get out of the session today. We're here for you today. So please, any questions you may have, make sure you put them into the Q&A box. Get them in early because people can upvote them, and we'll have time at the end to go through them. We may not get through all of them depending on how many there are. So please do make sure that you are putting them in as early as possible. We're also really encouraging everyone to share what you've learned after this webinar too. We'd love to see the tips and tricks and ideas that you've picked up. So please do make sure you tag Strive or tag me. And we really do love to see that. And also, if you do have any questions after the webinar that you didn't want to pop in the Q&A, you can feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll pick those messages up and have a conversation with you separately. It looks like everyone is here. So the other thing that it would be great to hear about in the chat below is just where you're at on this journey with exploring the employee mental health gap and surveys too. So if you do want to start up that conversation with folk, feel free in the chat. And hi, Glenn and Julie, thank you so much for popping your messages in. So just for those that don't know us already, we are Strive and we are focused on creating software that really works for your team and the unique environment that you operate in. Every employee, team and organization is so different, and we recognize that you need pulse survey software that will support you through everything. We work with organisations such as the UK Space Agency, Newcastle United Football Foundation, and councils such as Bolton and Barking and Dagenham, and even trusts within the NHS too. We also have a fabulous team that work alongside you to craft everything from the way you launch Strive and your surveys to help you make sure that you achieve your goals. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover a few different topics around the mental health the workplace employee mental health gap. Sorry, I haven't put my teeth properly in today. I'm all over my words. So we're going to look at what it is, first of all, and why surveys can really help us solve that problem. We're also going to explore how surveys can help us understand and close the gap as well. So really making sure we're getting into the detail with that. We also are going to talk a little bit about how we can ensure that the surveys we're running, and these will apply to any survey you're running in your organisation, really have the impact needed. We're also going to dig into why survey segmentation is really important in overcoming the mental health gap. And we're also going to go through some tips, tricks and ideas for your next mental health survey too. But again, just a little prompt, anything else you want to hear about or learn about, please do pop it in the Q&A or even share in the chat if you think there's folk in this webinar that can help answer your questions too. So why are we talking about the mental health expectation gap today? And why is it so important to the work that you're currently doing in your own teams? So 55% of workers are either starting a new job or looking for one, and a further 35% of working adults at the moment say that it is likely that they will consider changing jobs within the next year. We've talked about the Great Resignation a lot in the last few months, and we know that competition is still really strong for candidates across most sectors. Potential employees, and particularly younger ones, are looking for employees that take mental health and well-being really seriously. The mental health expectation gap threatens this and really does make it more difficult for you to recruit and retain your best people going forwards. So what is the workplace employee mental health gap? This is The mental health expectation gap is the disconnect between what business leaders think their organizations are offering and how employees feel about that support. It's as simple as that. However, it is quite a complicated challenge. So 80% of business leaders agree or strongly agree that their companies support the physical and emotional health of employees, but only 46% of employees who were asked the same question agree. This can mean that the time, resources, and money that goes into the planning and launching of new mental health resources and services are wasted because it isn't matching what employees need. It's a really complicated problem to solve. The workforce is more diverse than ever, and with the most generations in it that we have ever seen, all with their own unique needs, it's a really, really tricky one to solve. Most of the problems stem from attitudes, beliefs, and norms, which are notoriously difficult for leaders to change. And it has multiple factors too. Some under your control, some not, some that you will definitely know about and can see every single day, and some that are hidden in plain sight. Solving this problem, and the good news about it is that when the right interventions and changes are executed properly, they can make a really big difference for everyone. Of the employers who have invested in their workers' mental health and well-being and done it in a way that bridged that expectation gap, 60% reported seeing a reduction in absenteeism, whilst 40% saw a direct correlation with their profitability. So why can surveys help us solve this problem? They're a really, really powerful tool. And at the moment, I'm sure many of you use them for employee surveys, pulse surveys, and tweaking some of the work that you're currently doing with the advice that we share will help you start to hone in on how to improve your own mental health expectation gap. So when so many of us need to talk, there's only 14% of us that feel comfortable talking about our mental health at work. This is a place that we spend the majority of the time. So why is that? It's easier sometimes to talk about things that are easy to identify, easy to understand, and easy to label. Approaching someone to say, I'm having a hard time, is infinitely harder to verbalize and communicate than talking about something that you can put a label on. If we build a mental health strategy based on these types of interactions, it will not serve the people that need it most. This is why that mental health expectation gap exists in so many of our organizations. We're just simply not connecting those triggers to the data. The only way we can really be certain that our strategy is going to work for our people is based on feedback. There are lots of different ways we can gather data and feedback from our employees, our systems, and everything to do with the mental health work we're doing. For example, stress-related absences, EAP access, employee turnover. However, pulse surveys or surveys are one of the best ways of capturing the voice of everyone within your organization. And they will give you that detailed feedback that you can guarantee will create a strong foundation for your strategy. So why are they so great? One, they're anonymous. And this is really key, that the software that you use is anonymous and employees trust it. They will share detailed feedback that will be infinitely more helpful to you if they have that full trust. They can be answered when employees feel most comfortable to talk. This means that their answers will be well thought out, they'll be detailed, and you'll be able to really use that detail to create action that's tailored to them. They also allow you to move really quickly. They're quick to create, approve, and launch. So if you do notice something that's up and coming in your teams, they're a really great way to be proactive about that. They're flexible too, so you can explore what's best for your organization. And all of these things come together to really help you build a strategy that is based on how employees are thinking and feeling in that moment. So how can we really use surveys to understand and close the gap? As I said earlier, I'm sure lots of you are using surveys at the moment. Perhaps you are still starting to think about the fact that you do have that mental health expectation gap. So how do we really hone our surveys into understanding and closing that gap? First of all, we need to start understanding the attitudes and perceptions from employees themselves. So by regularly serving employees, you can track those changes in attitudes and perceptions over time. This data will help guide your decision making and help you refine any existing programs or implement new strategies to help you better support employee well-being. For example, there are some questions you could include in future surveys that will really, really help with this, such as, do you feel that company values Do you feel that the company values and prioritizes mental health? This will give you a really nice benchmark to measure your progress over time. How comfortable are you discussing your mental health with your line manager? This is really going to help you understand how you're nurturing a psychologically safe environment. And it also gives you an idea of how your line managers are currently supporting that mental health strategy. You could also ask a question like, how well do you think the company communicates about mental health and wellbeing initiatives? This is really going to help you start to understand where blockers may be to employees accessing those opportunities. So quite simple questions, but really important that we have them in there so we can really start to understand what we're working with, where we're starting from, so we can start to refine the way we approach it. Next, they're a really great way to be able to set up regular check-ins for employees. A study by the Mental Health First Aid Foundation found that just 25% of workers said their workplace hadn't checked in on their mental health since the pandemic, and over 1/3 of those polled has never had a conversation with their line manager about their mental health. Regularly checking in with your employees using surveys and asking those questions about their mental health and well-being will help you in a number of different ways. They make employees feel as though you care about their mental health. But to do this effectively, you have to couple those surveys with feedback and communication about the survey results. Doing these questions regularly will cultivate a speak up culture. Staff can see that you want them to speak up, they want to be heard, and that you're prepared to listen, but only if you feedback those results as well. That's the key part of making them feel really, really heard. It also supports any other work you're doing to create a psychologically safe environment, showing that you're really prepared to listen to all of the detailed feedback they have and they are safe to share that. These regular check-ins also surface any feedback, ideas, and thoughts that employees have about topics. They're a really great way to start understanding just how you can adjust your support to help bridge that expectation gap. If you have the ability to dig into your results using demographics as well, they're really going to be useful to pinpoint hotspots and provide targeted solution and communications for those groups. Sometimes when we're talking about demographics, and we do go into this in a little bit more detail in a few sections time, it isn't always about providing action and changing the support for certain groups of employees. Sometimes it's as simple as the communications around the support that you're providing. One of the things we do at Strive is really help you get into the detail of some of those results and provide communications advice for each of the demographics that you're maybe struggling to reach or aren't feeling a particular way. The surveys are also going to help you understand the whole person, something that we are understanding in HR and employee engagement to be more and more important as time goes on. It might be quite surprising to hear that the most common mental health and wellbeing issues that workers raise through surveys, employee assistance programs, etc., actually have nothing to do with their jobs. For example, a recent ACAS survey found that 63% of mental health at work, of employees' mental health at work was affected by financial worries due to the cost of living crisis, and 22% of parents cited stress as a balancing childcare with work. It can be really easy to assume that it's out of work, and because the problem doesn't originate in work, it means their work might not be affected, or the support that we provide can't reach that problem. We know that effective mental health and wellbeing strategies offer a broad range of measures and tools to support employees in various aspects of their lives. But to do this effectively, we need to understand that whole person. So thinking back to our surveys, we need to be able to include questions about general mental health outside of work too. Examples might be things like, are they engaging in activities that help it relax and recharge them outside of work? Do they have strong support and networks outside of work? Are they getting enough quality sleep? Or are they going through any major life events that would affect their mental health? These are all really, really useful pieces of information. Not only are they areas that we don't typically provide support in, although we are gradually seeing more and more of this type of support enter the workplace, they will give you ideas for places that you can provide support and start to bridge that gap. So all of these questions are going to surface those insights, and insights that you might not be able to gather elsewhere either. Surveys are also going to be really, really useful for you to review your current support. To do this properly, we really need to be open to changing absolutely everything about our current provision and support. Nothing is off the table. Let's make sure we're starting from that blank slate. The majority of the services that you currently have will probably give you usage stats that will take you some of the way to being able to review support, but surveys will give you all the context you need to understand if they are really effective. For example, whilst a service may appear underutilized, it may be that it's accessed by a demographic that is scoring critically low across the board in your surveys. It's important to have this context so you can continue to provide support for who needs it. And using the right questions will help you understand what employees think about current support, how effective it is, and if employees even know about the services to start with. You can ask some really interesting questions here too, asking about if they've used any of the resources available to them recently. Are there any barriers or obstacles to using the services provided? For example, if you've got non-desk-based employees that don't have access to smartphones, you may find it's very, very difficult for them to access quite a lot of the services provided. At Strive, we have a number of different ways that employees can access the surveys without this kind of technology to make sure that you're really reaching everyone's voices and you understand how you can bridge that gap. We can also ask employees questions and include questions in our surveys about if they've received adequate support and information on how to use the solutions available to them. Perhaps the employee doesn't have the confidence to access your EAP, or they've simply lost the information on how to access it. So all of these nuggets will really help you refine maybe your communications, the type of EAP that you're providing to make sure that everyone can access it, or maybe even adjusting certain things. So if you do run kind of speak up cafes, I know some of our customers run, perhaps there's exercise sessions available to employees. If they're all at the certain time of day, at the same time of day, on the same day each week, it may mean that you've got a certain segment of your employees that miss out on these resources and are therefore not benefiting from them. Using these questions will help you understand where those barriers are. So how do we ensure our surveys have the impact needed? As we mentioned earlier, the good news is that when the right interventions and changes are introduced properly, they can make a really, really big difference. What we need to do is ensure that the surveys we run really do have impact across the organization, and they don't just get filed away, forgotten about, and get the dust. One of the things we do here at Strive is make sure that we're building a full survey strategy with our customers, and that's making sure that this strategy integrates into the key areas of your business, making sure that you have that sustainable impact in the long run that's really going to make a difference for everyone. So here are a few of the things that we go through with our customers. One, we need to make sure that the important issues and these surveys are a board level responsibility. The board alone have the weight and authority to be able to set objectives, provide the necessary resources, and hold those teams accountable, all things that we know need to drive change. A critical part of doing this is properly reporting on those strategies, actions, and progresses, and only then will there be that necessary accountability to create that forward motion. There is a complication though with this. It can be really difficult as leaders to see those services and resources that we've put live and we've put a lot of time into not have that expected impact. It can feel like a really big waste of time and money, and it can make board members particularly hesitant to do anything again. This makes our job in HR really, really difficult. So we need to try and find a way to help our leaders be ready for change. There's no question that pursuing the truth about what employees think and feel requires a lot of courage and bravery, and it's probably going to make some of your leaders feel a little bit uncomfy too. However, there's a lot we can do to push through that. And one thing is just reminding ourselves and our leaders that we don't have to have all the answers, and that's where surveys become a really, really powerful tool for everyone. They really help us focus on connecting with employees, hearing from them directly, aligning our leadership actions with that employee feedback, and help us communicate transparently with our team too. This is really going to create a company that's able to make immediate progress towards improving employee well-being and take some of that decision-making pressure off of our leaders, because the answers are there for them in that data. We also need to make sure that we're measuring what matters, and we say continuously. You can't determine whether your interventions are working or whether progress is sustained unless you do have that reliable data. It's great to use a mix of subjective measures, such such as pulse surveys, so asking things like, how do you feel about your work environment? Is your line manager supportive? And coupling them with objective KPIs like your absenteeism measures and employee turnover if you have them. Combining these qualitative and quantitative indicators are ideal, and will help give you that full rounded context and continue to measure over several metrics to build a clear picture of the situation and how it's changing. We also want to make sure that our surveys have a mixture of proactive, reactive, and continuous measurement questions. Doing this is going to show a huge return and impact on our surveys. A 2020 report from Deloitte showed that proactive measures produce substantially higher return on investment than those that seek to treat people once symptoms have surfaced. So early interventions can either stop problems from developing in the first place, or at least reduce the likelihood that they get worse and impact the employee. The more days that pass when you're not feeling yourself, you're stressed, you're worried, or in a low mood, the more likely you are to develop issues. If you notice this change through surveys, and you notice employees starting to flagging these low mood, these stressed, or these worried days, you have the opportunity to invest in the resilience of your staff by helping them develop these stronger coping skills by introducing measures, services, or resources that will support them. There are various ways you could do this, but obviously surveys are particularly useful. I'm always going to say that. So, and making sure that you are, one way to do this is to make sure that you're gathering feedback on everything to support employee mental health and their full life cycle. We will go into this in a little bit more detail a little bit later. Another way to make sure that surveys are creating true impact is to make change where it matters. So this is all about thinking about where you will make a real difference with your employees. With the right data, you'll be able to take focused action and resolve the challenges employees are experiencing. But to do this, you're going to need to keep a few things in mind. Make sure you're always using specific and relevant questions. This will help you pinpoint areas of concern and ensure that you maintain those response rates as well. If employees see that you are asking questions that they don't feel are relevant to them, or that they don't trust that you will be able to act on, they will stop answering your survey. So it's worth keeping in mind for that as well. If you can't create change in certain areas, then don't include those questions on that topic. Like I just said, if you're asking questions, employees will expect to see or hear about it post-survey communications. And if they don't, it's going to affect your future survey buy-in. And it will also impact the amount of detail that your employees are sharing in those surveys too, which is ultimately going to stop you being able to act sufficiently on that data. Using segmentation as well is a really important tool. It means you will be able to follow up with targeted questions to specific employee groups, or bring them into the conversation and work with them to create a solution. This is really going to help you foster that sense of ownership and buy-in that you need to make some of these initiatives successful. So why is survey segmentation so key to overcoming the mental health expectation gap? This is something I've hinted at quite a lot. But one of the key lessons we've learned as leaders and HR folk over the last few years is that employees should be considered as individuals with unique needs and specific expectations. What will make each person successful varies so wildly these days, but serving individuals is what will improve results for the organization as a whole. But how do we create a really personalized approach whilst managing a group of employees? And that's where segmentation comes in. Over the next few slides, I'm going to talk to you about some of the insights into segments that we've worked with our customers on, and how you can use surveys to better understand these key groups. These are just examples. If you have particular segments that you are working with at the moment that you would like to hear more insights into, please do get in touch with us afterwards, and we can go through those in more detail. So the first one is gender. In England, about 1 in 5 women and 1 in 8 men have a common mental health problem, but men typically report lower levels of life satisfaction than women. This is a government national wellbeing survey data. Men in particular find it difficult to speak up and access mental health support. I think we have all seen that over the last few years, and we are talking about how to support that more and more. The most reported reasons are things like believing a lot of people feel sad and down. Why would they make a fuss? Feeling like they need to solve their own problems, not knowing what to look for when thinking about accessing support. So there's lots of things there that we can tackle if we know how. So how can we use pulse survey segmentation to understand these issues in more detail? First of all, we could target our surveys to these particular genders or analyze that data afterwards. This is really going to help us understand those key topics and also hone in on perhaps even some of the messaging that we need to update the communications around our services too. Another segment that is always really key to look at is ethnic minorities, particularly when it comes to mental health support. More than twice as many South Asian women are diagnosed with anxiety and depression as white women, so that's 63.5% versus 28.5%. Ethnic minorities are one of the groups that face the highest and most barriers to talking about mental health. Pulse surveys are a really useful tool to help you gather insights and feedback from these groups using safe, anonymous, and trusted methods. You'll gather more insights and details that will help shape your action planning rather than relying on more traditional forms of feedback. And this is, again, because some of the reasons that and some of the barriers they face when they look to speak up. So some of them are things like there's a negative perception and social stigma around speaking up for many of these ethnicities. The consequences and cultural stigma attached to mental health do reach beyond the individual too. There is a study that that I've accessed recently that mentioned that one participant in a study described how mental health diagnosis actually can stigmatize whole families, and it affects things like employment prospects and standings in the community as well. They aren't actually very good either at recognizing when they need to talk or need more support. And many have also had really negative experiences when they have spoken up and they've accessed healthcare services. These are all really important kind of factors to be considering when creating your strategy, but also really highlight the importance of pulse surveys in bridging the mental health expectation gap, particularly if you do have that segmentation feature with your software. Generations are another really important segment. I mentioned at the start of this webinar that we have more generations in the workforce than ever before. I've just picked out a couple of the generations here to go through today. So Gen Z are pretty tech savvy. They compare their success to others as a generation, and they do look for job security and are more likely to skip kind of higher or further education and look to work their way up in a company that way. They do compare their success to others quite a lot, which means that they're far more likely to suffer burnout than other generations. It's also really important that they feel part of a team and have good relationships with their team members. And all of this plays into the health of their mental health. So how can we harness kind of pulse surveys to make sure that we're really understanding how that particular generation are thinking and feeling? And it's around including some of the questions to make sure that we're hearing from them on specific topics specific to them. So things like checking in that they feel able and encouraged to speak up and share their thoughts and ideas during team meetings, checking in about their satisfaction with the relationships they have with their colleagues, and really just making sure that we're checking in on their mental health and well-being and how it contributes towards their ability to do their job. That tie-in is quite key for them as well. When it comes to millennials, they are the largest generation in the workforce at the moment and are more likely to be team players. They really love sharing ideas and value they value working for socially and environmentally responsible companies. So millennials prioritize work-life balance, but they are at a point now where they're in demanding jobs and they have a lot of expectations on them, and that can mean that they have to work long hours and suffer burnout. Remote work and reduced in-person interactions are also a risk factor for this generation because it can lead to feelings of isolation and loneliness, which impact their mental well-being. So some of the questions that are quite useful to include in surveys if we really want to tap into how millennials are feeling are things like, I'm unsatisfied with the allowance of flexible working. My physical work environment contributes positively to my ability to do my job. And I believe everyone has an opportunity to succeed at this organisation. Some other questions that are also really useful are looking at how their values and their organisation's values align and how they feel about your social and environmental responsibilities too. So while some of the questions I'm talking about already don't necessarily have that direct tie with mental health, you can start to see how our point about looking at the whole person really plays into that mental health expectation gap and how we can bridge that. So just have a quick look at Gen X too. So Gen X are kind of your 42 to 57-year-olds, and they're really open to new ideas, and they bring to the table a lot of leadership skills because they typically are slightly higher up and more experienced in organizations these days. That means typically that they are looking after newer employees and younger employees that are earlier on in their career journeys. They're also really skilled at collaborating across generations. So some of the things they look for in their job is a great workplace culture, team bonding opportunities, open communication, and feedback. And using all of these aspects are a really great way of looking at the other side of things to start to understand where these factors may be impacting their mental health and well-being at work. So another thing to think about with this generation is mental health stigma. This is still persistent amongst this generation, and it's generally because of the culture they've grown up with. It can make this generation really, really difficult to speak up. So again, pulse surveys are a really great tool to help and support this generation to talk about their mental health when they maybe wouldn't access some of the other services that you provide or approach a member of staff to talk about it. Isolation is a really big factor for this generation. They enjoy being part of a team, they enjoy team bonding, and the shift to work from home has presented new challenges for them. Financial pressures are a really big factor for Gen X too. From balancing mortgage payments, aging children that need support with university and college, or even saving for retirement. There's a lot going on for this generation that can increase their mental health, the need for mental health support. So some of the questions that we can include in pulse surveys to really dig down into their well-being and mental health is, I feel comfortable talking about my mental health at work. This is really going to help you explore their adjustments in how they're viewing mental health. So if you are doing a lot of work for Gen X and looking at how they are viewing mental health and feeling comfortable to talk up, I feel comfortable talking about my mental health is a really good question to put in for surveys for them. I have a clear understanding of my organization's vision and objectives. That's just going back to that feeling of belonging, feeling part of a team, and having good workplace culture. My organization really cares about my mental well-being, and I have a sense of accomplishment from my role this week. The final segment is line managers. Now, we're really big advocates of looking at line managers as their own segment here at Strive, and there's a few different reasons for this. They aren't a typical segment that many people will look at, but they actually have a really huge influence on how our employees think and feel about work. They're also under their own unique set of pressures. So whilst we need to look at it from the perspective of how they're facilitating our work in bridging that mental health expectation gap, they're also a group that we need to look after too. So understanding the line managers' attitudes and perceptions of mental health will help give you insights in how to best support them and best support their teams. And being able to use survey segmentation to do this will be key to helping you bridge that expectation gap. Again, there's not maybe necessarily any particular questions that you would want to include here, aside from ones around have I been able to check in with my line manager? I, as an employee, feel comfortable talking to my line manager about my mental health and well-being. And then obviously those check-in questions for line managers too, around how have you felt at work this week? On a scale of 1 to 10, how is your mental health and well-being? They will really help you get to the bottom of that. So tips, tricks, and ideas for your next mental health and well-being survey. First of all, we want to think about the times in an employee's life cycle that can introduce additional stress and emotion for employees. These might be interviews, inductions, working on new or important projects, handovers, returning from parental leave. Using surveys to encourage employees to share how they feel at these particular times and taking their comments on board will, one, help employees feel listened to during moments that matter to them most, and it will also give you insights that you can use to learn about what works well and when there is room for improvement. Oftentimes when we're looking at the mental health expectation gap, we're looking at the whole picture. How are all of our employees feeling at this moment in time? But actually flipping it on its head and looking at the specific moments in the employee life cycle, moments that present particular stress or emotion for employees will help you get to the bottom of how to close that gap quicker. So how do we do this? One, we want to map our full employee life cycle. This is going to be unique to your organization. So unfortunately, I don't have a template for you, but I'm happy to work it through with you if you want. But one key part of this is to note which periods will be important for you to understand. So every organization will be different here. I can see we have a multi-academy trust on our webinar today. Hello, Julie. So for multi-academy trusts, obviously your year is slightly different. September is often a big period, a busy period for your staff, and closer to exam season in May as well. So it might be thinking about those periods of time and how you can provide support that's specific for staff then. Doing this, you want to create surveys that can automatically send based on triggers as well. So having a look at that employee life cycle, having a look at those dates and times, and if there are any that are date based, it's a really good idea to set up surveys that will send and trigger on those dates. So for example, work anniversaries, start dates for onboarding, return from parental leave. And we can also add tags in to certain survey softwares. We can do it on Strive for project teams too. So we can have surveys that trigger depending on the tags that are associated with your employees, and that will just help you gather that life cycle data. It will build up over time, and you'll start to understand the emotions and the stresses for employees around those particular times. We also want to remove assumptions from our surveys. So we talked earlier about kind of wiping the slate clean and starting from scratch. But sometimes even if you think your organization is in a really great place, it's better to check and operate from a position of uncertainty and a position of not knowing everything. Operating from this blank slate is going to help you remove those assumptions and help you bridge that mental health gap more effectively. It's kind of like when you feel ill, you might go to the doctor to have a problem checked out. A good doctor is going to ask you loads of questions to understand your general health, to understand other factors that might be affecting your life, such as stress, alcohol, and more. These symptoms are usually the effect of a deeper problem, and the doctor's goal is to conduct the tests and ask the questions to determine the root cause of the issue. This is kind of similar to how surveys will work here. They're a way for you to test the organizational mental health, the health of your organization's mental health. And when a workplace issue such as mental health or employee turnover starts to have a negative impact, you're going to have more data to really understand why. So being able to uncover the real underlying issue relies on being able to ask the right questions, and we can only ask the right questions if we remove those assumptions. So how do we do this? When using employee surveys to understand root cause of HR issues like mental health, high turnover, or absenteeism, we need to think about how we can include a mix of questions that will allow us to look at the whole person. It really comes back to what we were speaking about earlier, about work and home life and the impact that can all have and how intertwined everything is for employees. We don't want to make assumptions about the root cause until we have enough data to support it. So how does this work when creating a survey with a clear goal in mind? For example, if we're looking to measure a mental health initiative or we're considering starting a new one, what we want to make sure is when we're exploring a goal, we map out all of the related facets for it to ensure that we're really taking that well-rounded approach to the problem or goal. So if we're noticing, for example, that staff are not feeling as motivated in work, or perhaps they are flagging that they are feeling not as enthusiastic, let's have a look at all of the factors that might be affecting that feeling. So it might be financial well-being, maybe their mind is at home where they're stressed about their money, perhaps they haven't been getting enough sleep. There's lots of different factors to mental health, and it's about thinking about them all when we're putting a survey together like that. We also always want to communicate the survey results. This whole strategy relies on employee buy-in, and that only remains for as long as they feel listened to and heard. Responding transparently to your teams is really, really key for this too. So we need to make sure that we're sharing the findings of all of our surveys with employees to build trust and accountability and maintain that long-term buy-in. We want to make sure that launching and closing a pulse survey is not the end of the process, and that we want to make sure that we're getting the most out of our surveys by communicating any results and actions to employees every single time. If we aren't sure that we have the resource to communicate and or act after these surveys close, then we need to reconsider our survey schedule and make sure that we can include this step. So if you're not 100% sure you're going to have the time to do it, sometimes it is better to skip that survey. So how can we make sure we avoid this mistake? Make sure that your survey plan includes post-survey communications, and also always assign an owner and a deadline to make sure you hold your team accountable. It's a really great way of just making sure it's done. After each survey, some of the things that I like to include in these post-survey communications are thanking employees for their participation, sharing the response rate and results, including insights and keeping them broad too, sharing next steps. It doesn't always have to be action, and ask employees to share their own ideas and feedback. I think one of the things we skip sometimes when we're thinking about those You Said We Did campaigns is the fact that they're an amazing opportunity to continue inviting feedback and ideas from our employees. So making sure that you're sharing your results with a mechanism that allows you to do that. Next slide, sorry. So that is the end of kind of all of the information we were going to go through today. In summary, it is a really complicated problem, but the right changes are going to have a huge impact for your organization. So it is always worth continuing on this journey. Surveys are a great tool for this and provide us with the flexibility and breadth of data to be able to solve the problem really, really effectively. It's also important that the surveys we run become a board level priority, and this ensures accountability and sustained improvements over time. Continuous measurement is always going to help you be proactive and pick up changes earlier before they become a bigger problem. And finally, segmentation is going to be a really, really powerful tool for you to create a personalized approach at scale. Does anyone have any questions? Not seeing any so far, but whilst I wait for questions to trickle in, I will just flip to the next slide and just say thank you so much. Just as a little reminder that we would love it if you could share your favorite insight from the talk afterwards, and tag myself, tag Strive if you would like. We really, really do love hearing about what you've learned from these talks, and it's so valuable, the feedback, for us to help create the next one. We're also going to be sharing a recording of this talk for you after the webinar. It will probably be tomorrow, so feel free to share with colleagues who you think will find this talk useful too. I don't see any questions yet, but feel free to put them in if you do have any. But in the meantime, if you need anything else from me or the team, or you have a quick question that you don't want to put in the Q&A box, that's totally okay. You can get in touch with me on LinkedIn if you just search for Lucy Harvey. I'm happy to share some advice on pulse surveys too, so please do get in touch, send a connection request, and we would really, really love to hear from you. I don't think there are any questions today. You're all very quiet, but thank you so much for joining us. It was a great, I had a great time. It was great to chat with you all, and I hope this was useful to you in some way, and you can continue those actions on to really support your employees with mental health. Have a lovely afternoon, and if you need anything, please don't hesitate to get in touch with the team. Thank you.